everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, I got to say, on a show where we're talking about Ohio State running at a very slow tempo on offense, the long power pause was perfect. Well done. Well struck. Well done. I appreciate it. I don't know if you thought about it at all, but I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. I always appreciate being appreciated. Yes, we are talking about Ohio State's pace of play. This is based on a listener question that we got from at Bod25 Mike, otherwise known as Sexy Dad Bod Mike on Twitter.
Of the Worthington Sexy Dad Bod Mikes?
Yes. So you know them. You see them walking up and down, the street there. Jeans and no shirt. All right, let's go. What are the chances, given both the transfer portal and NIL and the desire to keep starters fresh, that the Buckeyes pick up tempo to get early leads and get the starters out after 2.5 quarters and get the young guys more real reps against better teams? And I'm going to assume he just means when we're talking about uptempo, the offense, of course. No, I am wondering, because we've talked about this before, this just, to me, makes so much sense. Play faster, get more plays out there, get more opportunities for your guys. You've got the advantage on skill most of the time. Why not take advantage of it by playing more plays? And yet, Tom, Ohio State 114th in the nation in plays per game, 63.1. Indiana, people laud them on a message board for moving and getting things going, and they get their guy. They throw a bunch of points up, and then they get their guys out. They had 3.5 more plays per game than Ohio State. They were 67th nationally. Miami 69th, 66.4 plays. So when we say Ohio State needs to play faster, I think Ohio State needs to play more efficiently. I'd love to see them play faster, but how much faster do you need to play to get 3 more plays? I think you just need to pick up 1 more third down.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I feel like we could take this conversation and talk for an hour and 45 minutes and come to no conclusions, just talk ourselves in circles, because you can start with the point that you brought up, which is something we've certainly talked about before. If you have a talent advantage, it is in your best interest to have the sample size of plays where you can take advantage of those small incremental advantages position by position on the field. Give yourself more opportunities. When you are the big underdog, what are you trying to do? You're trying to slow down the clock. You're slow down the game, keep the clock moving, take the air out of the football. There's a reason that the scrappy underdog high school basketball team is the one that's running the 4 corners and not the really, really talented athletic team, right? It's always the scrappy little small town team trying to take on the high flying kids from the big city, and you're trying to, that you are not as good as them, so you are trying to limit their opportunities to take advantage of the fact that they are better than you. So when you're Ohio State and you're the big bad bully, the more opportunities you have, the more likely it is that you'll be able to take advantage of that on any given play. So that's sort of one data point here to sort of start with. I think there's part of this conversation, and the reason this is such a conversation this year, it wasn't really a conversation last year because they won the national championship. This year, there were times when you thought, boy, a little tempo would be good, and then they didn't really run it, and then you ended up getting dragged into these sort of slogs against Indiana and relatively few plays against Miami, and they lost those games. And when you lose those games, then playing with that tempo is bad. And so, in terms of what is Ryan Day going to do, which is where this conversation starts, I don't know how much, it didn't work last year, so you have to go the other direction. I don't know if that's part of it. I don't know if taking into account the play-by-play advantage that you have, if that's going to go into it. And, so those are 2 pieces of it. And then you get into the players. And are you trying to get more plays because that's going to keep your younger, then your younger guys get to play more, and then that will keep your younger guys happy and keep them there? Or if your younger guys play a bunch and look reasonably good, does that just mean that more teams are going to be coming after him and you're going to lose him? That's the whole separate section of this conversation.
And that's where I want to go next. But first, before that, so Ohio State was the only team in the bottom 50 in terms of plays per game that made the playoffs. 4 of the top 50 made it, and number 50 was Duke. And so almost it could have this year that would be 5 of the top 50, and then the middle 50, middle 40 or whatever, middle 35ish. That's the rest of the team. So to be the lone bottom 50, like, it tells you like nobody else thinks this is the way to go. In terms of any of the playoff teams, other programs can, you want to shorten the game because you don't have the talent. You don't have why would you try to make this longer when you don't have the talent? For Ohio State to shorten it and be one of the few and the only playoff team to do that, it's like, well, do you need to be the outlier here, or should you do what is the more popular and the more productive approach? Productive both, numbers wise in terms of what you're doing and what other people are doing. You don't always need to swim against the stream, I guess I should say. But in terms of the players, if Ohio State had played 5 or 6 more plays, or they're playing more tempo, I don't know that changes. Who does that bring back? Does it bring back Quincy Porter? I don't think so. Does it bring back Mylan Graham? Not if he's not playing well, not if he's not able to get on the field. Does it bring back Fahim Delane? I don't know, because the guys that left, like Fahim Delane, Quincy Porter, believe they should be starting. So more snaps is only going to, I would say more snaps would confirm that, but only if they played well. But more snaps would give Ohio State a much better idea if this person is worth paying up, and instead of going and getting somebody new. So it's not just about getting starters out. It's about finding out who is your team and what is on your team and what do you need to do. Who needs to be replaced? How much should this guy be worth? And it just gives you more information. Fewer plays is less information. And sure, you can do all the practicing you want. Coaches always say the games tell you the real thing. And so why not use the games more? And I wonder if that starts that factor. Like, wouldn't you want to know more about your team? Can't you use the games to do that? This past season was the season to do that, and they didn't. This next season, not the season to do that, and they might still have to, just to have as much information about their team as possible so that you can, move forward with the next team almost.
Right. And, the distinction there between the 2025 season and the 2026 season is the schedule that you're playing. And the schedule that they played in 2025 was, 8 games that you knew on May 1st. Yeah, they're going to win this game. There's not even a question. This year, you've got 5 of those, maybe 4 of those that you go into the season going, yes, absolutely. Yes, they're going to beat Ball State. Yes, they're going to beat Kent State. Yes, they're going to beat Maryland. Yes, they're going to beat Northwestern.
That's it.
Everyone other than that, you could see them losing some of these games. So you don't have quite the margin for error this year that you did last year. So yeah, last year definitely would have been the time to do it. I think we need to also talk about injuries, and I know this has been a super contentious point on our message board, where people have very, very strong opinions on whether this is or isn't a valid concern, but it is something that Ryan Day has expressed as a concern, and that is exposures, and that's what they talk about in terms of number of plays you're getting for individual players, and on every play you're taking a little bit of a physical toll, whether that's just from running up and down or getting hit or getting tackled or getting a big offensive lineman falling on you, whatever it is. They want to limit the number of exposures these guys have and the number of plays these guys have. That's the stated reason for doing things the way that they do them. Now, I think that there is certainly an argument that if you run a little more tempo and you get your same number of plays with your starters in there, then you can get your backups more opportunities. And that's something that over the years we've talked about a lot, that, boy, you'd love to see the younger guys get a little bit more of an opportunity just because that's valuable experience. The most valuable thing you have as a coach for your young players is the opportunity to play in games. That's something you can't simulate on the practice field. You can't simulate in scrimmages. You cannot. There's no substitute for playing in front of 100,000 people on national TV in terms of telling you how a guy is going to play in front of 100,000 people on national TV. There's no substitute for that. So there is certainly, that is the why behind what they do. And I think that there probably is certainly an argument, both in terms of strategically and in terms of gaining, sort of those incremental marginal advantages, but also in terms of really understanding what you have. Because if you have a Fahim Delane and he played 50 more snaps, he played 5 more snaps a game, or he played 12 more snaps, 75 more snaps over the course of the season instead of 50, you probably have a much better sense for what you've got there, and do you need to go into the portal, or is he maybe ready to go? And because maybe you do find out, okay, yeah, this guy is ready to be a starter. You didn't really see a lot of those really young guys last year, and yeah, they have the practice reps, but the coaches are the ones who tell us that there's no substitutes for game reps. So, okay, there's no substitute for game reps.
Well, and if in an ideal world, if you can get, say, in 3/4 of your game, or in half of your games, your starters can only play 3/4. Over the course of the season, that's like saving them a game and a half. And nobody ever talked about saving plays or saving players when it was a 14-game schedule, when it was a normal schedule. That only came when it went to a 16 or 17-game schedule. So, in theory, you can just play some tempo and get your starters out, and they wouldn't be playing any more snaps than they were in a 14-game schedule because of the fourth quarters that they'd missed in, say, 5, 6, 7 games or whatever. Now, that's all a little bit pie in the sky, especially with as reticent as Ryan Day is at times to pull his starters. But if you're firing, a 21 or 28 point lead in the fourth quarter, you can do this. Like you can pull them, and if you need to, put them back in. But we know how coaches feel about that. It's hard to get them started back up again, and you don't want to ever leave anything in doubt. But I just feel like more aggression and tempo in the first 3 quarters is a good thing. And if it ends up somebody gets hurt over the course of the season, I mean, it's football and you don't want that to happen. And coaches now talk about you can't have depth anymore. And Chris Ignetti said the same thing. Like, we've never had depth. I don't know what the best answer is. I don't think it's just playing fewer games and trestle balling your way when you've got more talent than just about everybody else.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a one clear right answer because as soon as someone gets hurt, everyone's going to go, well, if only they had, and you don't have the counterfactual, so you don't actually know that. To me, it's kind of self-evident that the theory behind the exposures is correct. Just if you say you have a 0.5% chance of suffering a medium severity injury on any individual snap that you're on the field for. The more of those you have, that's going to add up. It doesn't ever get to 100. It isn't ever 0, but it's just your likelihood of having it. And I recognize that that's a gross oversimplification, but we're not gonna get into the real specifics because I don't think anyone wants to do that. So, but yeah, it is. I think there's a strong argument for a little bit of a different approach next year. I don't think it was necessarily. I understand the thought process behind it. I think it worked out in 2024. I mean, it worked out great in 2024. They got the result that they wanted. The running backs were strong and healthy, and last year Jeremiah Smith was out at one point and Carnell Tate was out at one point. And so does that mean it didn't work? No, not necessarily, because who knows? Maybe if they had played more plays, you would have had more injuries. You don't really know. This is all just, you're dealing with probabilities. And you also, in terms of the number of snaps guys play, the argument for keeping them on the field a lot of times is, well, you've got to be ready to play a 4-quarter game. Yeah, you don't need to play a 4-quarter game when you're playing Kent State, but when you go to, I don't know, where do they go after that? It's Illinois and then at Iowa or something like that. Like, you might have to play a 4-quarter game at Iowa, so you've got to, even if you're up by 20 points on Illinois, you got to keep them in there because they've got to be ready to play a 4-quarter game at Iowa. So, yeah, there's lots of different factors and different considerations coming into play. And the thing that's kind of frustrating in terms of trying to make sense of this is a lot of stuff is pointing in like, well, this says that you should do that, but this other thing says you should do something else. And if you play guys, if you play the young guys more, it will make them either more or less likely to stay for next year. And which one is it? Well, it depends. And that's just, it's one of those questions where there isn't a clean, easy, neat answer. And that's why it has been a really, as I said, like a very, very hot topic on our board for months and months and months. And it's been a really interesting conversation. And it's like, this guy says that, and I'm like, oh, that's a good point. And then that guy says something completely different. I'm like, oh, well, that's a good point. And it's just, I don't know that there's this is the right answer. I don't think this is one of those questions.
They did it exactly right in 2024 because they won, and they didn't lose a ton of guys after doing so, right? And then they do something similar in 2025, and they don't win it, and they lose a ton of guys afterwards. So, like, which one is the right way to do it? And it just depends on the year and the circumstance and the defense. So the defense is another reason why I think you should go a little bit more tempo this year. And but again, like as Ryan Day says, every year, every season is a different team. And with that in mind, I don't think you should just like the tempo should not be grandfathered in to what the team is about. Take a look at what you've got. Well, what would work best for this team? 70 plays a game, 68 plays a game instead of 63. That's one more possession. Would one more possession, like for somebody like Ryan Day, who's lamented for years about the lack of possessions, there is a way to try to get more, and it's not just by winning the toss. But anything else, Tom, that you have to say on this before we go?
No, I think we've kind of talked this out for the most part. But yeah, it's a very interesting conversation, and it's one of those things I'm interested to hear what he has to say this spring and how that maybe changes over the summer, and then what it actually looks like in the fall. Because sometimes what you hear in the spring is not what you see in the fall.
Yeah, it's going to be no huddle, constantly up tempo in the spring, and then huddling beyond the clock. They're going to be resetting the play clock in fall practice. Can't wait. So there you go. Some thoughts on what the Buckeyes will be doing or won't be doing, and why they should or shouldn't, because either it's right or it's wrong, and we have proof of both. So easy distinctions and easy conclusions to make. So there you go. If you're watching, hit that thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. And, of course, you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.